Okay, everyone, thanks for joining this lesson that I've created. It's a reading lesson, and the theme of the lesson is developing self-reliance, and the specific sub-theme of this topic is interviewing, developing good interviewing skills. And there's two objectives. The first objective is that the learners will be able to identify main ideas and main supporting details. Those are the first two language objectives. They'll be able to infer preferences and opinions and reasons for opinions. They'll be able to identify predictable causes and effect. And then finally, they'll be able to make straightforward or logical inferences. And the content objective is to understand and apply the principles of effective interviewing that students will get from reading a blog. The learning strategies that they'll use are skimming and scanning for detail. And then finally, there are a couple of key academic vocabulary that they'll learn. Roadblock is one, research preparation. And then this material comes from a career advisor blog. Now, because this lesson is a departure from the regular course content, I had to offer it as extra credit for the learners. Again, because it doesn't really fit within the curriculum itself. The curriculum is based more on reading and writing, derived from this specific textbook that we use, and then also a series of graded reading material that learners use for extensive reading purposes. So I invited all the learners to participate by letting them know that I'm working on my doctoral degree, and this is part of a class, and that participation will guarantee that they'll receive extra credit for doing this. And then we use Canvas as our learning management system, and this is how I set it up. So I let them know right away the objectives that they'll see, and that the purpose of this was a description activity. And for the sake of time, I won't show you the video, but as I already mentioned that we talked about the objectives. And before they begin the lesson, they had this strategy to learn how to skim. So they'd watch this video that would teach them the strategy of skimming, which would help them to identify kind of the overall gist of what the passage is about, and then also some key details in the reading activity. So after they watched that video, they would enact that strategy, which was to skim the blog article, and then afterwards to participate in this schema-activating online discussion to answer these questions. What is the main idea of this blog article? What are the major points that you need to remember for future interviews? And how will understanding these points about interviewing help you in your future career? And the task that was given to them is to respond to 3 classmates, and they had to do this by Wednesday of about noon in Hawaii time. So I blocked out the name of the learners so that you wouldn't see, but I wanted to show you one example of one learner. Now, I should mention that only one learner participated in this, which was surprising that only one learner participated in this discussion board, but also not surprising because they already have a regular discussion board that they do, and some of them, seeing that this was maybe extra credit, maybe deemed it not worth their time to participate in this. Nevertheless, this is one student's response. Actually, this article is talk about interview skills. I need to remember to smile, ask my interview questions, and practice answers to common interview questions. I think these points are really useful in my future career because I can have a lot of time to practice and to search as different common interview questions. And also, don't give up on uncomfortable things on my social media in my daily life. So you can see here that the student answered these questions, right? What was the main idea? What were some major points that they're going to remember for future, that this student will remember for future interviews? And how will understanding these points help this student in his or her career? So as far as the questions themselves, the student actually did a good job in achieving in responding accurately to the questions. But as you can see, this student is probably an intermediate low, maybe borderline intermediate mid student. And so there's this particular post, as you can see, is rife with some grammatical errors, some pragmatic and lexical errors, but nonetheless, the student did well in responding to that. Okay, so once the students have completed that pre-listening activity, their task is to read this blog. And I will show you, I'll take you to the blog as it appears on my lesson plan, because I think for time's sake it'll be quicker. But they would go to this website about self-reliance, interviewing for successful tips. And then they have this context. And the reason I provided the context, because it's important to contextualize the learning, but it's also important for the students to be able to do what is called remembering the future. And remembering the future is this kind of pedagogical approach that I was taught when I was a master's student at Ohio State in their Japanese linguistics program. And it really means, and it comes from Galal Walker and Mari Noda in their book, The Pedagogy of Performing Another Culture, from 2013. And, I'm sorry, 2010. And the premise of remembering the future is that in a classroom, or in this case in an online learning medium, you create memories of language use that learners will then use in the future, and thus the terminology remembering the future. And so in this case, I wanted students, even though they may or may not be interviewing for jobs right now, this is an important skill that they're going to need to learn how to do, especially as they get to the end of their college career. Oftentimes, universities will have job placement workshops and things like that, where students will practice interviewing, they'll practice writing cover letters, and so on and so forth. And so that's why I have this blog, is to really help them to remember these tips and this language for that future time. So the blog says, if the idea of a job interview scares you, then you're not alone. Interviewing can make people nervous. David Reeve, manager of an employment resource center in Lethbridge, Canada, says that fear about jobs interviews is one of the most common roadblocks he sees in his work as a career advisor. But, he explains, interviewing is a skill, and like any skill, when you repeatedly practice, you get better. Kayla Bills, a recruiter for the Khan Academy, says that there are several things anyone can do to prepare to land the job they want with effectiveness. She and Reeve share their insights below on how to be better for your next interview. Bill says, suppose that you're really interested in a particular job. If so, then you should spend some time reviewing the company's website, learning about their products and mission, and reading any recent articles in the news. Your interviewer will be looking to see both your knowledge of and passion for their company. Put the time into it. An interview isn't something you can start preparing for the night before an interview. Reeves says your interview answers need to assure the hiring manager that you can do this job better than anyone else they're interviewing, and so you really need to understand the job and the company. Prepare a me in 30 seconds statement. Most interviewers will start by saying something like, tell me about yourself. If you can answer that question well, it sets the tone for the rest of the interview. So what is the best way to prepare for that question? A me in 30 seconds statement, says Reeve. This includes a personal introduction that includes your career objective, several specific accomplishments that prove you meet or exceed the requirement for that position, a few character traits or adaptive skills that set you apart from the typical applicants. In order to talk about all of these things in under a minute, you have to practice. Decide what is most important to include for this company and how best to say it. Practice answers to common interview questions. Preparing answers to common interview questions pays off because they will most likely come up in some form during the actual interview. Remember to smile. Bill says our team recently interviewed a candidate for a job he is qualified for, but he wasn't friendly, and he seemed to have a negative attitude during the interview. Needless to say, we gave the offer to someone else. Remember, no one wants to work with a grump. Make sure to smile and be friendly to everyone. People want to be surrounded by happy and positive coworkers, she says. Have questions to ask your interviewer. Most interviewers will end by asking, what questions you have for us, Reeve shared. In the past years I've spent as a human resource manager, so many people wouldn't have any questions. People totally overlook this part of the interview, but it's a great opportunity to make an impression on the interviewer. So prepare questions to ask about the company during the interview. Google check. Even if you pass your interviews, there's one more step in this interview process that's very likely to happen, Bill says. Be aware that employers will Google search you. What will they see on your Twitter, Facebook, personal blog, or LinkedIn page? Make sure you only post things online that you are comfortable with. Employers seeing because they will have looked at them. Okay, so once the learners read this, they'll have an interaction again in the online discussion board where they share their good, ideally they would have shared their good or bad interviewing experiences with one another, with the objective being in mind that they use this skill of narrating, which is an important skill that we all need to learn how to do. And then they would discuss how their previous interview could improve by application of the major points of this blog article. And then I exhorted them to be sure to practice their vocabulary as they role play. But as you can see, we only had one participant in the online discussion and only one answer to that question. So that was something that probably needed a little bit more time and maybe a little bit more encouragement for them to be able to do. Okay, so let's go back to the learning management system here. So here are the quiz instructions, right? So their purpose was to read the blog article right here. We've already read that, and then answer these questions. And I'll take you through their answers and actually how well they did. So the first question is, what could be a good title for this blog? And this is meant to address the objective of identifying the main idea. And so you have these 4 answers. And for time's sake, I won't read them. You can read them yourself. But the keyed answer is that practice is the key to a successful job interview. And as you can see, the majority of the students, 11 out of 14 students answered that. So that meant the students effectively were competent with this particular objective, identifying the main idea. And you can see right here that they answered it at nearly a 79% clip. Which may indicate that my distractors may not have been distracting enough, or it may indicate that the reading was too easy, one or the other. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's one thing that I would monitor if I were going to do like a follow-up reading, that I might actually, in Krashen's term, try to push it up one level, 1 degree of difficulty, and see if we can't push the students a little bit more to increase their vocabulary and their overall proficiency. Okay, question number 2. What are some important points to include when you're giving your me in 30-second statement in an interview? Choose all that apply. So this is a multi-select answer. And this is to, in order to assess the objective of identifying like main supporting details. And as you can see here, the students, for the most part, did really, really well. So these bottom 3 were the correct answers. Discuss some relevant achievements, provide a short personal introduction with a career goal, list some characteristics and skills that make you special. And you can, as you can see with my answers, I tried to make them, as far as testing theory goes, to make it so that, 1, the correct answers weren't way, way longer than any other answer or way, way shorter. And sometimes, in order to do that effectively, I will make 2 answers approximately the same length, as you see here, and then another 2 answers approximately a different length, but still similar with each other. And as you can see, overall, we had 36% answer this question, 32% answer this, and 20% answer this. So the students struggled a little bit with this, getting all the correct answers, but that can be inherent with multi-select answers as maybe not being the most ideal way to assess learner performance. Okay, then question 3, David Reed thinks that blank during the interview will make a really great impression on the interviewer. So this is assessing, inferring opinions, right? Because we're talking about what David Reed thinks. Okay, and then you can see these answers, right? Not smiling too much, checking Google a lot, doing good research, asking great questions. And again, 73% of the students answered this correctly. Okay. Number 4, preparing answers to common questions is good preparation for an interview because the questions commonly come up during a real interview. Okay, so this is inferring causes and events, right? The cause being if you prepare, the effect will be, if you prepare by practicing questions, the effect will be that those questions may or may not be asked during the real interview. And this is just a true-false. Again, overwhelmingly, 93% of them answered true. And again, if I went back, I might not ask a true or false question here because, again, that's a 50-50 chance. Multiple choice with 4 answers can be a little bit more distinctive in determining how accurate the student's understanding was. Number 5, Caleb Bills inferred that one candidate, blank, because of his negative attitude, one candidate, blank, because of his negative attitude and serious facial expression, and did not receive a job offer as a result. Okay, so this is making a straightforward or logical inference. That's the objective that we're trying to assess here. The answers: had practiced a lot, was really qualified, was probably unpleasant, had done a lot of research. And as you can see, the correct answer was probably unpleasant. 80% of the students got it correct. But had practiced a lot actually seemed to be kind of tricky for some of the students. And that was meant to be tricky in the sense that practice a lot is terminology that appeared in the blog, but it wasn't something that caused that candidate to not receive the job. It was because he was unpleasant. That is kind of the extent of that. There's an extension activity that I had the students do. And that extension activity was to have them network with friends, associates, etc., who have a job that the student wants. And then the task to the students, and this is extension and restructuring in the sense that now we're taking this from a reading activity where they've gained this knowledge and then turning it into a speaking and listening activity where they're asking other people how they gain the qualifications for the job that the student may or may want. And then they'll ask those people, friends, associates, so on and so forth, interviewing advice, and then they'll report on this experience in their weekly journal. So again, further extending the restructuring from speaking and listening to now a writing activity. And so these were the directions here. And in order for them to get credit, extra credit, then they would answer this question. If they read the blog and answer the questions. If they answered true, then they get a point for extra credit. And then here's how that question appears. And then in this blank field right here, they would type their response. Okay. So here is some student response to this extension activity. I asked my mom and friend about how they obtained their current job. My mom told me that first thing is I should to have some information about the company and field that I'm interested in. So again, this goes right along with the information for the blog. She told me that review the information, be sure you understand and remember it, and have a passion on everything that you want to do, then everything is going to be good. My friend do a part-time job at Mini-Mart. She told me that she received this job. She told me that when you want to do something, just do it, and do it by your passion, pay attention on it, and have a confidence. She worked hard on an apprentice, then she received this part-time job. So again, some language issues, but overall, you can say that this student really did achieve the objectives by networking with some people, asking for their advice, and then answering the question in a really satisfactory manner. Another response: my older sister is a university student now. To be a student of university she wanted to go, she had to be prepared to interview or interviewer of the university. I talked with her about some tips about interviewing. At first, I must be punctual to interview time. Punctuality is very important everywhere. Secondly, it is also important not to avoid the eyes of the interviewer. Unless I avoid the eyes of them, I can seem to be confident. At last, I need to do preliminary research and know information and knowledge about the company. To answer the question of the interviewer exactly, it is important to know about the company first. Therefore, it is necessary to know tips and prepare before I have job interviewing. So again, you can see this student is probably firmly ensconced as an intermediate mid-learner with actually some kind of delving up into intermediate high and maybe even advanced low language with for instance, punctuality is very important everywhere. This sentence, at last, I need to do preliminary research and know information and knowledge about the company. So these are really good because they're talking more about abstract things and using kind of complex language to talk about this. But you see that they're not firmly in advanced level, nor are they really firmly in intermediate high, because you have things like, therefore, it is necessary to know tips and prepare before I have job interviewing. Here's some other responses that you can feel free to kind of peruse if you want to pause here. And I included a slew of them, but obviously we're way beyond time. But that's the extent of the lesson. I think it ran really well. There's some changes that I would make, and again, giving more time to the students to be able to participate in the online discussion, and kind of advertising that more so the students would make that more of a priority. But overall, I think it went well, and thank you so much for your time and watching.